welcome to the fourth episode of the Kalakura Arts Festival 2016, presented with our venue partner, the CSMBS, and the Kalakura Association. Today's episode is titled Art Maps of Mumbai, Charting the City. Every city has a creative nucleus. Mumbai has Kalakura, the city's art and culture district, home to some of its most iconic architecture, art galleries, museums, and cultural hangouts. This center has now radiated its creativity to Mumbai's suburban neighborhoods, whose skilled workforce offer unlimited opportunities for collaboration and outsourcing of any kind, from pottery to leatherwork, from recycled plastics to art. Today's talk will explore the geography of contemporary art production through mental maps of city artists. Editor of Art India, Abhay Sardesai, will be in conversation with art researcher and doctor in geography, Christine Iturbide, prominent sculptor and qualified architect Arzan Khambata, and leading contemporary artist Sunil Padwal. The map is an important visual trope. Mapping is arguably our most common operational metaphor today, and there has been a related increase in the use of maps in art. Contemporary artists utilize maps to address issues such as identity, global culture, and personal memory. For some artists, mapping is a kind of roadmap or a record of an action, while for others, it is a metaphoric touchstone that interweaves fact and fiction. It can be a way to revisit past events, critique the status quo, or project future developments. A map can also become a form of elemental portraiture. Some artists today are more engaged with geographers' notions of mapping than others. What happens when one discipline uses the languages or tropes of another, and what are the contributions that each could make to the other, as well as to groups beyond either field? Before they begin their journey, a little bit about each panelist. Abhay Sardesai has been the editor of Art India, the premier art magazine, since November 2002. Under his editorship, the magazine has developed a culture studies-oriented approach and has become more interdisciplinary in its theme-based explorations. He has been a visiting faculty in aesthetics at the Department of English, University of Mumbai, and has also been the Chair of Humanities at Kamla Raheja Vidyanidhi Institute of Architecture in Mumbai. He teaches at TIS and the Dr. Bhawdaji Lal Museum. He writes in English and translates from Marathi, Konkani, and Gujarati. From 2002 to 2005, he was an associate of the research collective Pukar and was director of the Writing Across the City project, which explored the interrelationships between literatures and literary cultures in the city of Mumbai. He has written widely on art and literature and has read from his work at various places, including the University of Princeton, the University of Cambridge, Mumbai University, SNDT University, and the NGMA. Christine Iturbide is a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Social Sciences and Humanities in New Delhi. She also works as an expert with UNESCO in India. She is a doctor in geography from Paris Diderot University and CSRD Jawaharlal Nehru University, and has been based between France and India since 2008. With a background in urban geography and art history, her research focuses on contemporary Indian art territories, circulations, and globalization. In her thesis on the geography of contemporary art in Bombay, she questioned the mapping of contemporary art spaces in India by integrating the social and spatial dimensions of artistic practices and mental maps. Her current projects concern art industries, labor, informal networks, and the production of knowledge in cultural metropolises. She received a grant in aid from the Rockefeller Archive Center in 2013 and was awarded the IRD Prize for Best Short Film Screenplay in 2015 for her documentary film on the invisible workers of contemporary Indian art. Arzan Khambata calls himself an architect by profession and a sculptor by choice. Encouraged by his parents, he started sculpting after giving his 10th standard exams. He would scout the streets, garages, and construction sites for scrap metal, collect the same, and weld them into pieces of art he fondly christened scraptures, a word that has become synonymous with Arzan. What started off purely as a hobby slowly began to yield income. He got his first public response when he opened Scraptures at the Jahangir Art Gallery in September 1993. There was no looking back after that. Commissioned work started pouring in, and now his works are found in corporate houses, hotels, and private collections around the world, and range from 6 inches to 70 feet in height. The most prominent ones are the dolphins at Worli and the Siat rhino at Juhu Circle. Having had 11 solo shows and over 100 group shows around the country and the globe, Arzan is passionate about his work and takes up challenges which defy his own creativity. He lives by his favorite saying, which is, "The impossible just takes a little longer." Sunil Padwal studied at the JJ School of Fine Art and the JJ Institute of Applied Art. He worked in advertising before becoming an artist full-time. He is primarily a painter but has worked in varied mediums. His work comprises of line drawings, paintings, sculptures, and installations. He has shown his work extensively in India, and his paintings have been exhibited in numerous solo and group shows internationally. Recent shows include Shifting Frames at the Go Gallery, Amsterdam in 2015, Confluxes presented by DFP Limited at the Arts House, the Old Parliament in Singapore in 2014, Soliloquies Notes from the Drawing Book presented by Veranda 8 at Space 1857 in Chicago in 2012, and Soliloquies Notes from the Drawing Book at Gallery BMB, Mumbai in 2011. He received the Society Young Achievers Award in 2004. His public art includes a mural at Kalaghora, an artwork at the Mumbai International Airport, and a sculpture at the Delhi Metro Airport Express Line station. Sunil is known for his anguished protagonist. His line drawing series is a culmination of memory, confused metropolis, changing cityscape, and various turpitudes of modern-day society. Sunil seeks inspiration from different aspects of everyday urban life, including construction, pollution, a fast-changing skyline, and humans and animals coexisting in today's concrete jungle. Sunil lives and works in Mumbai. Welcome to all our panelists. I now give the floor over to Abhay to take the conversation further.
Thanks, Urshila, and thanks, Asad, for inviting me here. It's such a pleasure and privilege always to be part of these wonderful events that Avid hosts, and Asad with such wonderful creative finesse conceptualizes. I'm also privileged to be part of such a wonderful panel, so accomplished and also people from whom I expect a lot of interesting insights about the way the city produces itself and then allows itself to be consumed. As Urshila has put it in her note, we start off with the premise that the map is a kind of an episode, a kind of an anecdote which allows us access to understand the various bouquets of practices and processes that come together to create a huge landscape of art production in the city. It is, in more ways than one, a way of recalling a whole, and therefore performs the role that what one might call a trope like synecdoche performs, which is a part that stands for a larger portion, that stands for an entire zone of operations. I start off by talking about this very interesting book that I recently read, and I was talking about it to Christiane, by a French writer called Michel Houellebecq. Interestingly, it's called The Map and the Territory. And it was published sometime in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, and it involves this very interesting protagonist called Jed Martin, who is a contemporary artist. And he achieves fame by photographing Michelin maps. Now, as the narrative advances, you have the writer, Houellebecq, quite a controversial writer, as some of you probably know. His latest book, Anticipation, was accused of being sexist and racist. He inserts himself in, gets himself murdered, and sort of also allows for two very interesting things. One is a discussion of the map as a critical act of representing reality through the fact that the main protagonist is an artist, and apart from, of course, achieving fame as a person who's been photographing Michelin maps from up close, to being an artist who actually comes up with extraordinarily brilliant photorealist presentations. In fact, there's one painting that is talked about in the course of the narrative of Damien Hirst and Jeff Koons having a discussion and dividing the art market. So that's at one end of the spectrum, and on the other end of the spectrum, as this protagonist sort of slowly disintegrates and dies, he talks about a whole host of photographs that he allows to be exposed to the elements. And that itself becomes a kind of an environmental installation. So, in other words, mapping here becomes a way of plotting life, of collecting it, and of distributing it. So there is this constant interplay between what one might call the microscopic and the macroscopic. And most importantly, between the various tenuous and strong connections that create this network. The map, therefore, ceases to remain a physical entity, but becomes an act of zooming out and zooming in. It becomes a product of, one might call, scalar drama, sort of very operatic, really. Which also brings me to the second point of arrival into this discussion, which is a very interesting tract written by this Argentinian writer, my favorite really, Jorge Luis Borges. It's called On Exactness in Science. It's a very interesting piece where he talks about a situation where the map of an empire coincides point by point with the territory. So much so that the map threatens to overwhelm the territory. What he's actually sort of underscoring is the fact that the image, in more ways than one, is overtaking, outpacing the actual object. Okay, in a consumerist society, the projection is actually replacing the person. All right? So the map here becomes a kind of a supernatural, overwhelming presence. The map, therefore, becomes a kind of a drive to forge connections not only between places but also spaces, diagrammatizing a network of professions and a template of practices. Now, when we talk about the art maps of cities, we try and use, at least we hope that in the course of this conversation we'll probably arrive at this. We try and use shifting vectors rather than definitional certainties. The relationship, for instance, and this is where I hope Christian will sort of hold forth. The relationship between, say, the inner city areas, the slum lands, and the city proper, visibilized, the city proper as in the more visibilized land, slice of land with art galleries and institutions like museums, served by a network of roads and highways and offices, and powered by residences and infrastructure and capital. Kala Ghoda, of course, is the focus and nucleus of art in the city, with its galleries and the cultural district, restaurants, the Elphinstone College, JJ at a stone's throw, so on and so forth. But as one tries to understand our location as city dwellers, we also try to realize how challengingly, we are placed in a city that's constantly molting skin. We have the distribution of art colleges, art institutions. You have the moribund JJ. But you also have a whole host of other colleges. You have Raheja, Academy of Architecture. And I also want to involve colleges that try to deal with architecture, KRVI, Juhu, for instance. You also have studios. You also find, for instance, that there are artists, very few artists who have studios in South Bombay. Sunil is here, Sunil Gowde, one of the sort of luckier people who have studios in South Bombay. There you are. And then as you move on the western grid, you find that there are several studios in places like Bandra. And then you move further away, you find a whole cluster of studios in Malad, Goregaon, Borivali, and Dahisar. Right? Similarly, you also sort of complicating this south and west register is a museum like Bhaudaji Lad, which is an interesting, engaging initiative for showing art, for hosting talks, and for mounting pedagogic initiatives. So the question we hope to ask is the South Mumbai stranglehold being broken? Is it being challenged, or is it being complemented? All right? Complicating this even further is the untold story of art production in Bombay, in India, which is that of laborers who make the art pieces, welding, assembling, fabricating, magnifying maquettes, in fiberglass, wood, and other multiple media. Dharavi with its Kumbharwada, with its leather workers, Shivaji Nagar, which is probably the most important slumscape we have in the city, which is very close to Devanar, with its migrant and very, very skilled populations and its workshops, Dahisar and Mira Road with its skilled metal workers. Okay? Now, it's also interesting to know that the market widens the rift between the artist and the artisan. And often the work of the laborer goes unnoticed, unacknowledged, and unspoken. So the slum's eye view of art, as it were, reveals rifts and fractures that are really quite disturbing. You know, one can't really forget the fact that our friend Hema Upadhyay was murdered at the workshop of one of her fabricators. In the innards of a Kandivali slum. This is not to demonize a class or elevate another group, but it's just to throw light on a fault line that really runs deep in our art landscape and in the system of art production. We also hope to maybe have a discussion about various artists who have been using the idea of the map, you know, the map as a kind of a shorthand, as a mode to collect and steer a practice. Jayashree Chakravarti comes very easily to mind, you know, her maps of memories, of lost rivers, of encroached homesteads caught in a crosshatch of blues and browns, of a mass of deep and shallow forms and shapes. Reena Kalat, for example, her tracking of patterns of migration and the creating of composite worlds. Shilpa Gupta's maps of borderlands, what I call the Toba Tek Singh-ness of the various acts of belonging and unbelonging. Atul Dodia's imaginary museums, mapping a crucial area of absence in our cultural lives. Camp and its tracing of intercontinental trade routes and flows of capital and labor. Raqs and its project of mapping workers' initiatives and recording its growth through pamphlets and other literature. The Cyber Mohalla project, where the map itself becomes an act of intervention. Before we sort of move on to these areas and maybe touch on some of them in the course of our conversations and then in the course of our question and answer session, I would like to ask Christiane to please come and make a presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Asad, for organizing such a wonderful evening. I'm very happy to be here with you tonight. And so tonight I wanted to share with you my own story of my journey with art maps as a geographer and as an art historian. So that journey started in 2008. I was starting a PhD on the geography of contemporary Indian art, and quite quickly the city of Bombay became very attractive. The geography of art in Bombay became very attractive, and also maybe because it has this singularity of having an art district, which was quite an object of fascination. So my own journey with art maps was to move from this kind of representation of the city with almost an historical map as an art piece in itself to this kind of map telling also the story of the geography of art in Bombay. So I'm going to try to summarize how I moved from the first type of map to the second one. So just to come back on the different kind of maps, we're usually doing as geographers. This is the kind of map that probably remember your geography classes, a very classical map with a very accurate, a very administrative understanding of the territory. So this is a map of India with very clear boundaries, national boundaries, regional boundaries, a map which is representing the number of painters and sculptors based on the Census of India data of 2001. Actually, the last one, 2011, are not yet available. But so this kind of map, very quantitative, almost trying to give an objective vision of the reality, is a sort of snapshot of a situation at a precise moment. Another kind of map I was doing at the beginning of my research was this kind of map. So introducing a new element, which is the historical element. So here you have a map of the main art fairs, Biennale, Triennale, of contemporary art in the world. And the size of the circle is proportional to how old the Biennale has been going on. So what this map is showing, it's actually how the centrality of the art world moved from a very Western Europe, American-centered, to a diversity of places, and the role that today Asia and Asia-Pacific is playing in this new dynamic. So you can see how China and Japan led the movement, but how South Asia, and in particular India, are now becoming part of this mushrooming of Biennale, Triennale art fairs. So what the map is also showing here, it's a shift in the center-periphery relationship, a change in the relation of power in the art world. Let's come back to Bombay. So here you have the first map I started to do as part of my project. So again, going back to a simple location map, to locate on a base map the development of the art spaces in the city from the mid-19th century until nowadays. So two elements clearly appear from this kind of mapping. The first one is how the neighborhood of Fort, the historical neighborhood of Fort, was already in the 19th century a location that gathered art galleries, the first art societies, the first places that then developed in South Bombay. So, and you can see how over the years it attracted an increasing number of spaces to become the art district we know today, mainly an art district with a commercial and institutional function. The other movement we can see appearing slowly is the development. We're talking about art schools. So this map here is showing how art schools started to develop also toward more the suburban era, and how after the 1980s an increasing number of spaces tried to emerge in the suburb and even in the metropolitan region as far as Navi Mumbai. So these two movements of concentration of the art scene, and at the same time trying to develop and extend this process of diffusion more in the suburb and metropolitan era. So after doing this set of maps, I wanted to go a little further and explore the possibilities of mapping to try to go a little further in the understanding of the art scene. And here I would like to introduce two key persons in my reflection on how to map art. What are the limits also of this kind of mapping? So the first person I wanted to discuss was the geographer Anne Volvé. And Anne Volvé did a very interesting study on this particular artwork. It's called the Wrapped Pont Neuf, and the Pont Neuf is a famous bridge in Paris, and it's a work by Christo and Jeanne-Claude that was done in the 70s in Paris. And Anne Volvé did actually a map of the speciality of this artwork. And this is the kind of map she produced. So here you can see in the center actually the Pont Neuf itself, how it's located in the city of Paris, how it's located in France, and also how it's connected to many other locations from Japan to Europe to US. So what was really, I think, interesting in this mapping was how it was suddenly really revealing the complexity, also the spatial complexity of making an artwork already in the 1970s with this network of people, with this collaborative organization, and how to give a visual idea of this complexity through the map. So it was a very interesting map, also one of the first one I found who was that precisely highlighting the high division of labor in such complex artwork. The other person that particularly influenced me was the architect-based Prasad Sethi. And I would like to read out his definition of cartography. Cartography not only provides the framework and system to make maps and record of land, but also to install a way of seeing, of understanding land in a particular manner through the idea of boundaries, lines, and polygons. The clarity of cartography has an inability to deal with instabilities of position, ages, and spaces. Mumbai is made of such diffusions. It takes years to change the polygon of property on the cartographic map. On the street, it happens every hours. So I found this quotation was very powerful in its way of revealing how the stability of the cartography, and especially in a city like Mumbai, is inadequate to talk about a certain logic of the city. And so trying to overcome that stable and in a way comfortable cartography and try to move forward. So I was interested in this way to incorporate more in my way of mapping those flexible, invisible, unstable boundaries. And the result is coming now in a few experiments that I conducted with an artist in Mumbai. So there is two kinds of map I would like to present you tonight. One is the participative maps, and the other one is the mental maps. So the participative maps that I did, I choose one that I did with Sunil Gaude on his work Alliteration for the Venice Biennale made in 2009. I was very fascinated by this artwork, and I met Sunil Gaude and gave him a base map and asked him if he could draw for me the geography of this artwork and the geography speciality of this artwork, including its making process. And this is the map that came out that he drew for this project. And I think the most relevant element for me was to see how suddenly the centrality that I was so far only considering in Fort was moving toward Andheri, was suddenly making spaces like Thane or Kaler appear on this map and on this art territory. So indeed, this way of shifting the centrality, this way of highlighting also the suburb and the metropolitan region has very dynamic places for art. This would not necessarily happen on the previous map that were more emphasizing the commercial and institutional aspect. This is one example, but other maps really emphasize all those neighborhoods Ibe was starting to talk about that we never associated usually with the art territory, including recycling workshop in Malad, including fabricators workshop in Shuri, or craftsmen, metalworker clusters in Kamatipura. So it was an invisible geography of art that was allowed to appear with this way of mapping also the geography of production. And the last element this map is also showing, we can see how there is this idea of going to Venice and coming back. So it also shows how all those different fabricators, small spaces that usually are, again, in the margin of the art territory, are actually taking plenty integrated to a global art system. So how all those spaces are completely part of this global art system, global art market. The second experiment, I gave a simple white sheet of paper to a couple of artists, and I asked them this time to just draw me their art map of Bombay territory. And I wanted to discuss tonight two of those maps. This is the first one, the one you see at the very beginning. What is the most interesting when you're asking someone to draw a mental map is then to get the explanation. So I just gave the instruction to the artist to draw me the art territories. And I asked, what did you draw here? I was very surprised, and I wanted to know more about this, this way of the artist of seeing the art territory of Mumbai. And she said, for me, what I draw in the bottom of your sheet of paper, it's the Mumbai art district. We can almost recognize the triangle of Kalagoda, here your Archer Bunder Road, and more broadly, Colaba Fort era. And she said, this is my studio, this is my home, and I feel somehow, for me as a young artist, there is this constellation of very prestigious spaces in the south of the city, and I feel that for me it's a little difficult to have access to this prestigious constellation, which is also the good gateway to the global art scene. So that was this very particular feeling that never came out in the interview, but was very, very strikingly appearing in the art map. The last map that I'm showing was drawn by Shreya Skale, senior artist and founder of Kona Alternative Spaces. So Shreya's divided the white sheet of paper with one very clear line, and he indicated south for Sobo, South Bombay, and north for Osbo, other Bombay, and associated this north part with artists and this south part with galleries and collectors. So again, we could see that division, and at the same time, I think in this map, the complementarity of the two parts, but usually this Osbo is not as much highlighted in today's researcher analysis, and I think that was what those maps allowed to do. So just to conclude on how those mental maps, I think, were very useful in rethinking the way of mapping the art territory. First, I think it highlighted the importance of the suburb and the metropolitan region beyond the South Art District. It's really where all the young, emerging, future artists are staying or living. It's the place to visit, actually, as much as the South Art District, and the place to think as being a creative territory for tomorrow art scene. The second aspect, I think, was that mental map and participative map helped to deconstruct a certain territorial hierarchy imposed by the idea of art district. And we can come back then again on this idea of, at the same time, complementarity, or what is exactly this relation, because every day it's progressing, and I think I hope to come back another time with more experiment on this mental map. This is only the beginning. Thank you.
Thanks. May I thanks, Christiane, for throwing light on the various vectors, constructions, and constellations of power that determine, different kinds of cartographies of belonging. May I now request Sunil Padwal to please come and hold forth. Just a point here about All right, just a point here about how we actually looking at the map as a kind of an enabling vehicle, to open out a discussion about various acts of categorizing. Okay, the map as an organ to taxonomize. Okay, that's the basic thrust of our discussion here, and not really to look at the map as an object, or so it's going to be quite an extraordinary act even for the artists to reassemble their own practices and to talk about them. May I now request Sunil to please come and talk and show us some of his works.
Well, good evening. It's not a presentation as such. I'm just going to share the recent project of mine, and there are lots of drawings and photographs which I've done in last almost a year. And let me go back to the discussion right now was about South Bombay, and I grew up in the bylanes and the congested and the most probably not so happening area of Bombay. I grew up in Kamatipura, Kumbarwada, and somehow, the childhood shaped lots of thinking, lots of my the way every day I work. So I have seen people stabbing in name of religion, and when you talk about a map, when you talk about violence, when you talk about objects, when you talk about animals, people of the city, somehow all of that stayed in my mind. When I actually saw a person dying from one angle of my building, he literally walked through to the other side of the street. So even today I get those dreams of that street. They keep reoccurring, and whenever, even today when I go to Chor Bazar, when I go to Kamatipura, when I go to Kumbarwada, and it's not just a mental map, it is beyond words, the kind of thing they shape. So Bombay, I mean, we all love our city, we all love to hate our city, but when I remember when I passed out from the college, the project which I did, we were celebrating 40 years of freedom. And then I questioned, what are we celebrating, And after a few years down the line, when I see Bombay changing a bit, now also I question, are we on the right path? The answer is obviously no. Recently, only recently, we could see some visible changes in Bombay. And then again, I asked the question as an artist. Then actually, it's a dilemma right now. When I ask the question, are we changing for the good? Probably yes and no, I would say. As an artist, the kind of stimulus, the kind of energy, the kind of inspiration the city gave me 20 years back, I would say it was much more real in lots of ways. Probably I don't have words to explain how. It has a decrease in my book, at least personally, and I do lots of drawings. The drawing is like very personal on lots of levels, and drawing itself creates a form which is not your original. It comes from multiple layers of what you see, and when I say what you see is not just the present. It's of course the present, the past, and it goes beyond. When I saw that person dying, that map of that street, somehow I've been etched on back of my mind, and whenever I draw, it comes indirectly somewhere and resurfaces in abstract ways. So I'll just this recent project. Generally I work with very intricate, fine lines and multiple layers. And again, when I was in my childhood, all these small objects, mundane objects, which probably doesn't, apart from its functionality, it doesn't do anything to you, but they are part of what I am today, each and every small object. And also what in this project I actually used I grew up in 80s and 70s in Bombay, and that design element, the way I saw buildings, the furniture in the houses, lots of the documents which I could retrieve in somewhere, I used all of them in this project. I just quickly run through and also I done, as I said, I done lots of photos I took on my iPhone and worked on that. That series will follow after this. So you could see, when I talk about even the changing landscape of Bombay right now, where I stay right now at Lower Parel, I moved there 10 years back. And every day I wake up, I see something is coming up, and visually I have a very strong memory. So what I do is everywhere what I see, I try to create from what I see. Every day it changes a bit. So I have done similar this kind of drawings, 7 or 8, and each drawing has got a different, if you look closely, then only you could see it. And also some of the works which I did, we are talking about Kala Ghoda, and I remember we changed our name from Bombay to Mumbai, and we had this huge equestrian statue of King Edward VII. And somehow, I don't like this abstruse thinking of ours. You can't just erase our colonial past like that. Even I am a Maharashtrian boy myself. I struggle with the language. I was in a municipal school, but even then, I knew that is our history, that you can't just erase with one. So all these small things create one collective map, which probably it's not so easy to just say this is South Bombay, North Bombay. No, it's not that easy to just, it's collectively, yes, probably you can say, if you go to suburb side, that inspiration is not there. If you look at the old monuments and all the stuff here. But collectively, entire Bombay has shaped my thinking as an artist. Just going through the, can you skip to the next the photographs? And recently I've done one, can just show the, again, this is a good indication of, I've been asked to do one outdoor sculpture. RPG has approached me. So when we say maps, our history of 7 islands, so I felt the tetrapods are a good indication of the seascape of Bombay, and this is a nice balancing act of the changing face of Bombay, and this is a metaphoric way of representing that. And there are some works where I directly use the map. You could see the Kala Ghoda and the map of Kala Ghoda. Here again, in this work, I actually used Google map of Bombay, and when I see Bombay growing, after a few days, probably the Google image will look like this. Vertically, horizontally, everywhere it's expanding. And the other project, this is interesting because what we are talking about, I had gone each and every byline of Bombay, and it's not about capturing just the moment. It's about capturing the essence of all those years of what we have become right now. And there are intricate drawings which you can't see on the very low-res images. Anyways, this is not forte, but if you ask me to draw or paint, I would do a better job. But any questions I can ask you, answer that later. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. All right, thanks, Sunil, for this lovely presentation about the viscerality of belonging and not belonging to the city, and for sort of discussing your vocabulary of comprising patterns where interiors sort of slowly transform and melt into the exteriors. Which brings us to our friend Arzan. Arzan, may I invite you to please come and hold forth about your work, especially a lot of your work which is installed in various public spaces in the city.
Thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. And quite a benchmark I have to follow. 3 avid speakers and then, okay. So what I did was, whenever I'm called to talk about a particular subject, and whenever something has been outlined to talk about, and I'm not only supposed to talk about my work in general, what I do is I try and find a connection with my work and the topic that's given. And this time, we were talking about maps and all that. I went mad. I was calling Sunil yesterday. I said, Sunil, what the hell am I going to talk about? I don't know. I said, I'm going through a, sort of dizzy. But then I realized that the question I'm asked most of the time is saying, what inspires you? And very difficult to pinpoint. But then I realized that the actual reply is Mumbai as a city, Bombay as a city, where everything that I see around me, everything that you actually smell, hear, the chaos, the smoke, everything around you, the horns, and just passing through a crowded street, seeing someone stand at a balcony, children playing, a broken cycle, a broken headlight of a car. I keep on saying broken because I love scrap, okay? So everything I see around sort of inspires me. And that's when I realized that the map of Bombay, the outline of Bombay, the sheer sort of, the lines and everything that flows through it, the streets and everything, that is what Bombay is to me. And coming back, it's a muse. Bombay actually is my muse, okay? So now, I realized when I was going through that, taking sort of photographs from the city, aerial photographs, I realized that once upon a time, in 2003, I had done a show at the Birla Art Gallery. And somehow, today, just sort of thinking about it, I connected that, okay, fine, that show was an abstract show. I took my pieces of copper and iron and stuff. And today I realize where all those compositions had come from. They had come from the city. They had come from aerial views of the city that you stay in. And just to give you an idea, this is what the Mithi River looks like when it flows through the center of Mumbai. And this was my sculpture. It's very difficult for an artist to pinpoint that this inspiration has come from here and this piece has come from here. But when you're living in this throbbing sort of literally being this alive city called Mumbai, everything that you do is a part of it and it reacts. Everything that you hear, and artists are supposed to have some wonderful receivers on the head which take in everything. And at the right point of time, it comes out and forms a piece of artwork in our case. So this is what it was. I called it the lifeline, And of course, this wonderful sort of landscape that you see when you're landing in Mumbai, if you ever come across Vikhroli, so now they've stopped using red carpets. It's only green tarpaulins and blue tarpaulins that you see when you come inside. And this huge carpet that you see, I just realized that somewhere or the other I had used that in one of my works as well. Sort of this magnitude of when you step into Dharavi. I used to go there as an architecture student. Parag is here from my class. And we used to be sent in there. And lanes are like 1.5 to 2 feet wide. And yet everything is so well organized. We just whiz through the outside and realize and think, oh my God, it's so dirty. Inside it's not. They throw all the dirt outside for us. Inside is very, very clean, believe me. So this is what it was. And coming to every city has these oases. Now, this is what a standard oasis looks like. The word oasis came from the deserts where camels and lost people would sort of go towards the water and all that. And in our city, also, automatically these oasis forms. Unfortunately, I think today, in today's data, any good mall is an oasis, I think. So, like, we don't have parks to cycle through and all that. So where do people go? They go to a mall because it's everything. You can spend right from your morning breakfast to your movie to evening and window shop and then come back in the evening and Papa is broke. So this is again, if you see the map of Mumbai, you see the circles that you see there, the clusters around. And I realized that also I had done something similar. It's like this. I call that the coronation. It's this vast open land in which everything sort of groups around and there's this busy sort of a buzz around a place. And that's what the oases of our city were. One more like that, a cluster, sort of all coming together. You know, it could be an aerial view of people sort of gathering in a large park somewhere. And this, I actually realized when I was thinking about it, about maps. It is basically, as Sunil said, it's inbred in you. What he saw, of course, his vision was highlighted by what he actually saw and it's stuck in his mind. But when you're walking through streets, imagine going to a new European town, the first thing I do is I pick up a map. So I know where I am, I walk through, and in a day, you get your bearings and you know exactly what you're going through. You understand? Again, sort of these linkages which come together, sort of, you know, squirming into one side as if something is drawing them together. And then, of course, this you can make out from the blue waters. This is definitely not Bombay, but something like that, sort of I also sort of reflected in one of my works called Tidal. So there is a connection. There is everything that you see and hear is within you. And I told someone, I said, my mind is like a carousel. It's like a huge giant wheel inside, which has these bits of information put, and it keeps on rotating. And when the time is right, you actually pick out these small things and create what you have, you know. And now, like Google, let me drop down from the top view to the street view. So you've seen Google Street View mode, right? Okay, but Bombay doesn't have that because they were not allowed to do it because of security reasons. So anyway, so this series is what I did with my human figures, and it is about man reacting with his environment. This particular piece was called Consequential, where these huge trunks of wood are supported. They are solid pieces of wood. I play around with a balance. And it is basically about man reacting to his environment. Being an architecture student, we actually were made to study that if you lock up a man for a day in a square room, or you lock up a man for a day in a round room, how much difference it is and what will happen and where he'll go. In a square room, probably he'll sit from corner to corner. In a round room, probably he'll move around or something like that. Every wall, every street, every tree, every sort of shadow coming into your life plays a difference in your thinking and what you are. You actually are the space within which you are contained. Again, two more of men in his environment. On the left, you see this man literally hanging in balance between the city and the concrete jungle, so to speak, which locks him in. On the right-hand side, you see that sculpture called Axial. It is, again, the verticality of a city and how a man is sort of compressed within that. It's a different thing. By the way, I love reactions of people when they see the sculptures. I thrive on that. So whenever I have a show or whenever I put up a sculpture out in the open, I hang around there to listen to what people are saying. And one of the most phenomenal explanations about this sculpture on that side was, I just went behind, there was this couple talking, and he's saying, this is me, on top is my wife, and bottom is my mother-in-law. So he's saying I'm sandwiched between the two. But this is inferences of what people think when they see sculptures, and it's wonderful. It could mean anything else, but if that was what it meant to him, fine. This one was actually a piece called Megapolis, which I did on Bombay. It shows man trying to sort of push the spaces around him and try to create space for himself. Sort of, actually his legs are grabbing on to the last pieces of left land that are there, you know. And coming to, again, a closer look at Bombay and a closer look at the streets of Bombay. These are the basket fellows, the vendors, the handcart vendors who go there. And I've actually shown only their legs because their legs get the most tired. And they all sleep in their own baskets, literally most comfortable. So their pieces of equipment which they use every day may become their pod sort of thing. And they love sort of going into that and sort of, you know, making their own cocoon sort of thing at night. The dabbawalas, again. Again, from the city, these are Mumbai-centric sculptures which I've done walking around the city. As Sunil said, he's walked around everywhere and he's taken photographs. And at that time, of course, your iPhones came right now. When we weren't given cameras and all that, it was all mental. And then sometime or the other, it would come out on paper. Again, a small little shanty. It's called Home Sweet Home, where the woman is holding the roof, the man is holding the walls on the side, sort of to show that each and every home, however small, is made up of a unit family. This particular piece I did for a show which, it's got these photographs of Dharavi, and I purposely bleached the photographs because otherwise it looks so messy with so many colors and sort of shades which you don't want to recognize. So I actually bleached it, and I found that the compositions that you get in that are wonderful. And one thing stood out, common. A house may live, literally I'm telling you, a house may live without water, without electricity, or without a fridge or anything like that, but they cannot do without a dish TV. Everywhere on top there were these dish TVs scrambled as if it's nobody's business, okay? And it just goes to show what is important to the people and how it changes the landscape. In maps, we talk about looking from the top. It is also about looking from the side. It's not only the plan, it's the elevation, how the landscape changes, suddenly. And that was Mumbai, my muse. And I also get amused by Bombay. So what I do is I carry my photographs and I notice things around. I love playing around with words, with humor. And these are a few of the photographs I've taken on the streets of Bombay, just to give you an idea. And I've titled them. So this here goes. So this is just outside my studio. Then there's this one. So all these things, it's so interesting. And I keep telling people, I say, when you visit a new town in Europe or wherever, it is not only the spaces which are specified on the tourist maps which are interesting. Just walking through the most mundane streets, looking into a household, just seeing some children play on the street, someone selling something. And if you have an artist's sort of set of mind and all that, you can go into these various angles of photography and get some beautiful visuals which you might never get otherwise, So this fellow I found just on my street there. This is in Colaba. You all must have seen that. It's a huge fruit. He just keeps on stacking it so tall. Oh, these are everywhere. In different grades. There are some which only show the sort of concave top. It just shows how much the elevation of Bombay has changed. Our streets were 3 feet lesser than what they are right now. And we've just gone on filling and filling and filling. I live on the ground floor, I'm very scared. This one is one of my favorites. So, now, coming to, and of course, who can ignore the signages in Bombay, And one of the most phenomenal things you'll see is behind trucks. And this, of course, what they mean was use extinguisher. And it's an extinguisher. And it is things like this which make Mumbai interesting, sort of. And of course, something as simple as this, I couldn't caption this, but I just love this photograph. And initially, when I used to travel with a group of artists and all that, some of them had nicknamed me a Japanese tourist because I photograph everything, right from a fallen matchstick to a crushed strawberry to everything. So they had said, you're going mad, but that is what I like. I do not like the whole monument, the whole street. Of course, that has a part of its own. But to go into the details, and find out how textures, how sort of peel paint, how earlier bricks react to you, that is the fabric of the city, which you need to actually see. And now coming to the last part of my piece, public sculptures. There are a few, I've been lucky to do a few contemporary ones out in the open. So this particular one was at Nariman Point. And recently it's migrated to somewhere in Kandivali on a traffic island. And this was, of course, also done by RPG Industries at that time. 98, this was installed. The dolphins at Worli. And of course, what I'm trying to get at is, I'm being very selfish, I'm only showing you my images. And of course, one sculpture which I'm very proud of, the Vikrant, done from the scrap of Vikrant itself. And this is at the Lions Gate. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is that in our city, I was talking about the oases, we are talking about art. I have always been in favor of art being out in the open, because people who come from the stations, who walk on the streets, who are going to offices, do not step into galleries. And that's where outdoor festivals and things like that work. Because people need to see contemporary art. It's okay if they don't appreciate it. It's okay if they curse it, if it's okay if they react in a negative way, but to see it makes a difference. 3 years back, myself, Sunil and Brinda, we did a sculpture with some French artists, and we put it on VT station, CST station on the platform. It received such phenomenal response. Half the people tried to throw it away because it was blocking the path. And few of them stopped and started seeing it, and being there for about a day, people started noticing things and asking questions. And that was the beauty of it. If you don't put out art out in the open, how will people realize what is happening in the other part of the world? And what happens is you're forming these oases in the city. Our public is not attuned or has not been taught to appreciate the architecture that we have. According to me, your street from CST to Regal is one of the finest streets in the world that you can have. Imagine it being devehicularized on a Saturday and Sunday and having things out in the open and all that. We are not tuned to that. Until we get to that point, we need art in various places in Bombay so that it's like spread out like that. And that is the map that I want to see, that everyone wants to see, where you actually have something that takes you from place to place, from gallery to gallery, outlining everything so beautifully. In 2011, I was in a place called Oakwood, and that's where maximum amount of Frank Lloyd Wright's houses are there. Such brilliantly laid out maps and books which allowed you to go from one place to the other without asking a single person where what was. I mean, phenomenal. I mean, that is the level we need to come to. You know, and I was just thinking, MAPS also is an acronym for more art in public spaces. Okay, and before anyone in the audience looks like this, thank you.
I think we can, let me invite all of you, Christian, Sunil, and Arzan, to please come up here, and we can have a little discussion, after which I guess I'll throw it open to all of you to have questions. That was really very funny, Arzan. Very nice. You know, the first sort of observation that I want to actually share with the three of you and with all of you is about the city moving in and the city moving out, as it were. You know, we talk about art that's inordinately private in your case, or art that's very public in yours. We discuss the notion of mapping erasures, you know, or mapping longing, mapping loss. To invoke somebody like Italo Calvino and his notion of the invisible cities in a totally different key, of course. We also looking at the invisible city as the informal city that deepens and extends and is part of the territory that you are mapping. So I want to actually ask you to dwell a little more on these topics. Christian, in your case, the city of art that is subterranean, you know, which is informal but is dying to get formalized, dying to be visibilized. All right? Sunil, in your case, the idea of the city as a zone of assault, you know, the example that you are so obsessed with, that has completely transformed the way in which you have thrown your voice on the canvas and beyond, as an arena of violence, as a field which is populated by protagonists that are suffocating, that are in the throes of a panic attack, that are victims of violence. And Arzan, in your case, the city as a generator of waste, of refuse, and the initiative of creating art, you know, out of that which is disowned, out of what one might call a culture of orphan objects, you know. So the idea of the recycled city, you know. So Christiane?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I was trying to explain with those maps is if we think of the way we usually think about the art and the art scene, the way we usually see it, it's only through its formal institutional aspect.
Right.
And if we think more broadly out of the art system, generally speaking, how is the art economy working in India? 80% is informal. So when I started to think, okay, so basically what I'm mapping, it's the 20%, it's the top of the iceberg. So how to get this 80% there on the map? So that was the origin of the project, to try to better understand. You could call it invisible, but invisible for whom? Who make it invisible? It's true that you were talking a lot about when we go in a city, we take this map, and then it's easy because there is all those places pointed out. So it's also more a personal willingness of move out of the map, of explore those spaces which are not here. And I think maybe just the basic question is, where is art? Is it where it's pointed out of the map? Or as you say, when I look at the street and I see this form of art. So I think map are a very useful way to see the city in a way in positive, and we have to see it with all that it doesn't shows. And that's always the way we should look at the map, for what it sees and what it hides. And especially in the case of art, because art is not just where we point it out on the map, it's also on all those other spaces, and it's a personal journey. I mean, what I really would like is to see in the audience everyone their own map of the city, and I'm sure we'll have 200 different kind of maps, and that's those invisible maps that are there and enable us to see the city in a different way. So,
Sure.
yeah.
So talking about recycling sort of stuff and all that, I have known I was just talking to someone that whenever we talk of recycling, the thought is that you're creating something which is temporary,
Right.
which is not. That has to be broken, because there are some materials that you can recycle which are phenomenally able and phenomenally sort of sustainable to sort of do so. I'm talking just like a shed. There are hundreds of sheets. I just worked with a different material recently, and that's how I know. It's called plastic infused aluminum, and it's used for temporary structures and then thrown away. I used it for a sculpture somewhere, and then the sculpture belonged to someone, of course, and the next day I found out they had just taken the whole thing down and sold it. And that is so durable and so wonderfully sort of, malleable and everything, that it can form some phenomenal stuff. I was thinking of making like bus stops from it, literally. Sort of the simple stainless steel poles, and you use sheets like that, and you can make sort of kiosks, your kiosks which sort of spring up every now and then. They still make it out of wood. They still make it out of wood and galvanized iron, and your AC sheet roofing. And the moment you find these sustainable materials, there are so many of them, that if someone's interested, someone can actually use these, and they are available throughout the year. And I've seen them because I sort of scout the streets and all that, and it's wonderful how they do it. I'll just give you an idea. One of the most interesting projects I've seen someone do from bottles. I've worked with plastic bottles. Sort of, I've created a maze at Kalagora, and in 2006, I had done a large framework with wires, where 3,000 children came in with plastic bottles and Tetra Packs and everything, and they tied it to the horse.
Right.
And they made it into such a wonderful sculpture. We called it the Color Goda, okay, because it was so colorful, And as coming to this project I saw, there was this man who made an island for himself. He made an island from himself by tying plastic bottles, and after that, he started putting his soil on top and growing trees on it. The amount of bottles he had collected and all that. So what I'm saying is that this notion that reusable material is temporary, reusable material is only to be given to children in school to make a project and all that, is not there. We can do much, much more from it if your mind is applied in the right sort of manner.
No, surely. Sunil?
No, when I was referring to the violence, it was not just communal violence. I remember in the 70s and 80s, as in gang wars, and I remember when I said that there are the 6 lanes of Kumbharoda and Ketwadi had more than 12. And the by-lanes opens to that side of Kamatipura, and here also it goes to Panjarapol, to Bhuleshwar, Baidoni. So they have their hiding places, and lots of that plays integral role. When I was scared to walk in that lane, not to go there, because that's scary. And I've seen it, a soda bottle will come at night after 9 o'clock, and I've seen it actually police always used to land up late. Actually like that old films where that old van they should always have the siren coming first. I don't know why. How are they gonna call? And literally, I'm not kidding. I've seen that happening. I said, how you gonna catch those people? And not small incidents. I remember a small boy came from UP somewhere. He was living down the building, and after 4 days he became he had some sword, and he started fighting for these people. And when you see all that, and you actually at that, I was in probably from 3rd grade to 6, 7, 8, you started asking questions. You become mature so early at that age. And also when you play there cricket also, the language they use is not the language which probably my kid uses. That language is completely different. So it affects on multiple layers, and obviously that is not easy to just wipe out in just one go. And that's actually interesting. I have seen that side of Bombay, those by-lanes. And when I started this project, and I started almost 4 years, started with my iPhone, clicking that. So when I never noticed that building before. And wow, it is such a nice looking architecture. How did I miss it? I've grown up in that Mugbatka lane, and in that corner, it was always there. So when I revisit that, with that kind of thinking, plus the changing skyline right now, and I'm producing work, layering my own thoughts, and line creating its own form, it's fantastic. That feeling I get is amazing.
So just one question that I'd like to ask both of you really is about, this is a very general question, okay, about how, do you really feel that creating art is a way of regurgitating different memories and of layering them, one against the other, to create dynamic maps which the audience can then populate, can relate to?
Sometimes it just happens. It's not you think about it,
Sure.
Lots of times, as I said, it depends on different artist process. But for me, it always whatever I see, it stays with me. Sometimes it's obvious if I have to create on that certain lines, if I have to, then obviously I go in the past and see if what's the closest I can come to in that. But generally, it's more impulsive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you actually described my work process. That is what it is. It's as I said, bits of information which I keep seeing and storing automatically. And then when you realize that when you're working, something clicks somewhere, something connects. You see a piece like yesterday, I saw some wonderful pieces of old wood from boats. And they look so beautiful with the old rivets and stuff like that. I just wanted to pick it up, and I will eventually, and do something from them, which I'm sure I have seen or thought of earlier. It is definitely memories that you collect, and as you say, at one point of time, you bring it all out into a piece, keep it out in the public, and see how the public reacts to it, and see sort of, are you in tune with what they are thinking about? And that works so well in abstracts. If you don't title an abstract, let the viewer sort of have his own views on that. It's wonderful. And they go ballistic on it,
No, sure. Just one more question to the three of you before we open it out. There's this sort of general dissatisfaction with this center and periphery model these days in sociology, in art, in all walks of life and across disciplines. So many people have suggested the periphery model, or the center model, or the sub-center model, so on and so forth. So I'm just very curious, to know from the three of you, and especially because all of you bring your own particular way of looking and inhabiting this space that we so wonderfully are sort of possessive about, which is Bombay. Which areas or which specific geographies do you feel you would, as a scholar, as artists, want to sort of look at as the cultural nubs of the city? Do you feel that Kala Ghoda is the focus and nucleus of culture and art in the city, or do you feel that the capital or the sort of the point of focus, as it were, has actually shifted? That's number one of the question. The second is, personally speaking, which of the various parts of the city that you have inhabited over your lives or have visited in the course of your life, do you feel actually holds the key to understanding how the city has changed over time? I mean, the first and obvious thing is, of course, looking at your own childhood. For me, for instance, Ville Parle, and now, of course, Chembur, where I live, King Circle, and Girgaon. These are points of rupture and represent certain very important processes which come together to confirm the presence of a city that's molting skin every other day. So I'm just curious to know from you and from your different zones of belonging about how you sum up this crisis.
In terms of areas, in terms of an art nub and all that, as I said, art and architecture to me are together. Town planning, everything sort of comes together. And I think there is no better area than what I was talking about, the entire from your fountain and your Kulaba area and all that, with Kala Ghoda in the center. I think I would naturally call it the art center for Mumbai, definitely. And also, you take, as you're saying, how things have developed. I'm looking at something that was barren land or mills 20 years back, and something like Lower Parel which has developed. You go on reclamation and you look across, that skyline was not there 20 years back. It was nothing. Just I remember one bowling alley and one little nightclub over there, and look what that area has turned into today. Now, I feel that area has a phenomenal sort of capacity to let in that little bit of art and culture to come into that area, but it's not happened. It's become a commercial area, it's become an entertainment area and all that. I know a couple of galleries there, but not holding the ground, I mean, but you drop into Kala Ghoda today, and you can look at 10, 12 galleries throughout the day and go there, but which doesn't happen in any other area. Right. So I would still call it the center, the hub, and I wish, yes, what you're calling, should it sort of move out from the center? Yes, it should. It should come out in different parts, and it should come out in that same quality. It should not be a second-hand treatment that happens, It's like I've been asked to exhibit at some galleries, and Sunil also, Bandra, Andheri, and all that. And as you go far away, you realize that no one comes to see your work. Openings go dry, and people have no clue about what is happening in the art world, and it's a sad thing. And so I feel, as much as it is all coagulated in one area right now, it needs to move out a little, and the quality is important, the context is important, not the quantity. It could be just one or two galleries, but sort of very solid, that's what I might say. Sure.
I mean, art district, as you all know, it functionally, yes, it makes it easier. Right. Because they are all at one end of the city. But as he said, I lived in Lower for the last 10 years, and before that I was in South Bombay, almost what I did not like, as he rightly said, we had such a nice landscape of these old mills, and from the, you named from the chimney to the. So I could see, actually lots of art galleries, like you see in Venice Biennale, actually happening in those rundown mills. Yes. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Probably it's commercially, whatever might be the reason, but. Personally, I am more towards the alternative spaces, wherever that could be, more than just one Kalagoda or for even Lower Parel for that matter. Anywhere where you could present art in an alternate way, I am more for it.
Sure.
Maybe I will start with an anecdote linked to the art map. So I was in a Thane art school, and I was doing the map project with a few students, and so lots of them drew me a very maze system, like thinking that it was Thane related to Kalagoda was so far away, and so we were discussing this question of relation with the different part of the city, and they told me, but Christine, Thane is the center here, and Kalagoda is the periphery. And I was like, so true, yes. So true. I mean, where are you positioned to consider you are at the center and you have a periphery? So that was also a very, for me, I really like this remark from the student, and considering also the difficulty to travel in the city, to the fact that the south is hardly accessible, so in terms of transport is an issue in making the art scene available. Do I think in terms of center and periphery, I think my research make me looked at Kalagoda as an element of a complex network. So I tend to think less in terms of center-periphery, but in terms of a network of spaces that hold their role to play in a global system. So without Kalagoda, you don't have the entire production system which is behind, and same without the entire production, geography of production, you don't have the commercial and places of exhibition. So yes, about this. Now, from a more personal point of view, where do I see the center? I'm currently working on a project, so on the Mr. Invisible, so on the all those people behind the art scene, the fabricator, the assistant, artist assistant, the different workers of the art industry. And the idea of the film was to go where art is taking birth. So there is this idea that for me, the center is somehow where the art is taking birth. So it can be in the artist studio, and it's definitely also here in the mind of each artist. But the place where also it's really taking shape, I realized that all those places, like when you describe Kamatipura, I've been lucky to go and see really artwork taking birth in those neighborhoods, in the dust, in the noise, in the heat of whatever metal workshop it is. So I found those places filled with beauty, and at the same time with this terrible feeling, also the condition of production of absolutely terrible. So, there were this very paradoxical feeling of being in those places that look at a center like a place where you put a seed when the artwork grow. But so those, for me, there were those multiple centralities, but yes, somehow, for me, it's still where the artwork is taking birth, which I feel is the center. And I think it's maybe important also to highlight that currently most of those spaces are also going through very large redevelopment projects. So all those places of fabrication are being slowly disappearing from the city. And that's also something that we should be aware of, which kind of city we want for the future, and where do we want? Do we want to keep those knowledge, those skills there? And all this is, it's also a question that we're part of. I mapped them right now; they are there, but for how long they were still there on the map? Or yeah. And maybe the last point I would like to make is, if we still consider Kalagoda as a center, why and how should a shift happen? Because this is the also entire question. There've been this project, and we're at the Prince of Wales, so if someone had more information. So in my research, I came upon a project of an annex of the Prince of Wales Museum in Thane that was supposed to happen. If you look at the record of the city, it was part of the Genie Room finance. So there were a project of creating an annex of this museum in Thane. And I found the idea quite amazing. So it's not happening for many reasons. Maybe it's going to happen. Maybe it's just a slowdown in the project. But it's when you just think in terms of population, how much people are today living and working in South Bombay, how much people is in the suburb, how much is in the metropolitan region.
Sure.
So, and when you compare with the number of art spaces available, you're just thinking that it's disproportionate. So, yes, it should, that centrality should be rethought, and everyone can be an actor of this process. That's the way I think it, to appropriate new spaces, to turn them into more innovative, creative spaces. I think this is, and it's already slowly happening. See how Godrej Cultural Lab was trying to make Vikhroli a little bit more as a centrality in the suburb. How Kona in Borivali is trying again to make a little bit more the suburb. So it's happening, and let's see what's going on in the coming years.
Lovely. Thank you so much, the three of you, for your illuminating answers. I'm going to open this out to all of you. Please introduce yourself and then sort of keep your questions really brief.
Small question. If you, on the map of Bombay, if you draw a horizontal line, say crossing Bombay Central Bhaikala, do we presume that people south of this line are art literate, and those on the north of this line are art illiterate? Also, because if you, the way also Arzan made a mention of non-response to art shows, so does it also mean that people south of this are thinking contemporary and the people north of this line are realist?
Arzan, would you like to take it? I don't really think that's how it actually works out, or that's the way in which the cookie crumbles, you know. But let me ask Arzan to...
I didn't mean that, no. Not exactly. Is the mic working? Can you hear me? Okay. So, no, I didn't want to say it that way, but this is from experience. Yeah. This is from experience. And not to generalize.
But how do people respond on the south of this line and north of that line to art?
I would take the line more up.
To Bandra?
But, yeah, it's like, I'll tell you, I mean, just in great humor, someone said, he said, Bombay stops when the rickshaw starts. You know, so someone told me that. So I found it very funny. But it's not, and it has happened. I have experienced it. And I myself do not have a reply as to why that happens. Why? And the same artist opening in a gallery in South Bombay gets an X amount of audience, gets an X amount of response. The same gallery takes the same artist somewhere, let's say not even Jew. There is 1/4 the response, 1/4 the audience, and all. I don't know why it happens. Probably, I don't know if someone can answer that. What I've noted is happens, but I do not know why.
I think it's probably also to do with certain sort of paradigms of connectivity, you know, which create the city as we know it, as a sort of as a project of traveling or commuting between point A and point B.
That depends. I know Arshia had a gallery in San Francisco wherever. It was quite different happening. People used to go there. So you have to keep doing it to build an audience, like any platform or organization.
True.
You can't expect it to
Correct.
go on.
Correct. That's what. The consistency was not there. It was just not there. You know, galleries would open with great promise, and then somewhere down the line you would hear they've just ended.
Also, I think there is an entire network of institutions. Yeah, which is part of the South Bombay environment, art environment.
Institutional framework, I feel, needs to be kind of pierced.
Yeah.
In that sense, you have to distribute it in that way. And to talk about the idea of, say, the center periphery, the issue with Bombay is that Bombay's periphery became its center. that's how the city started. Your center was at the periphery. So the idea of the center periphery was something that has not ever been, South Bombay becomes by virtue of like what we call the market and the city center, the fort. And anything outside the fort became the market, the black outside of the city. And the Riot Act, etc., are things where you don't allow congregation. So that kind of mindset has so far not been kind of pierced in terms of even culture. I think that needs to happen that's why this talk kind of happens in that sort of way. Because one good example is, of course, Shreyas. That's why Shreyas's map is very interesting.
Yes.
And the other thing that is, if Clark House, they're a good example of why Sumesh and Zasha maybe set up, was also so that artists could travel in, and that place could become an adda. The idea was an adda where all of them congregated, they could spend the night there, because they were kids that are coming out of art schools and they're unable to travel back. But then how do they pierce the Indian art market, the city's art market? And so this was this kind of space, this kind of haven for a kid that comes from an interior Maharashtra to do a course here. And then what do they do when they finish that course?
No, absolutely.
Also,
I think it's also to do with the idea of forming a community of people, and quite a few ways in which a community gets constructed depends on sort of paradigms of exposure, the opportunities to understand how your city is part of a larger network of cities in the world that's constantly changing. It's also dependent on your access to languages. And we all of us know about how there is this deep schism that runs in the city, as far as the English-speaking world is concerned and the non-English-speaking world is concerned. So all of these, I think, come together to militate and to create the the network of possibilities that makes Kala Ghoda into an important cultural hub and disallows several other spaces, from actually transforming and becoming important sort of occasions.
I mean, there needs to be also a critique of the gallery system in itself.
Yes.
The gallery system also, who do we make it for? We allow a certain section of society to access it in a certain place. But if you're going to have galleries that are there in one part of the city, and someone working in Virar that comes to work in Andheri at 7 o'clock in the evening, they're not going to want to come all the way to town to watch a show, even if they would want to, because there's a logistics of travel that is there. So it's infrastructure that is also making it impossible for that travel.
Also
becomes access.
It's accessible to BT and Churchgate very easily. So
Yes.
If you look at you look at arts and culture, you look at how theatres traditionally have grown. It's next to train stations where you have that access. And the gallery is the one way of looking at it. I think what you have on the roads outside Jangirat Gallery, you have all these artists coming in, through the year coming. That's a point of exhibition too. So you do have that. People have access to that.
No, absolutely. It's also about how history becomes a kind of a habit. History of traveling from the west to the south, from the north to the south, from the center to the south, sort of also transforms into a way of wanting to sort of go and look at the museums, the work in the work on display, or go and be part of a pedagogic system, which is either JJ, Xavier's, or Elphinstone, so on and so forth. And similarly with the galleries. So I think it's really a very, very huge question, and I guess we need to look at it very carefully, because it really sort of allows us to address all the various fault lines that 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 go a long way into creating this experience called Bombay. I think we have maybe time for two questions. One second.
Yeah, I'm Hemangi, and my question is related to, like, Arzan showed us slide which says there should be more art in public spaces, and I would like to know from Christine if your research also includes this whole scene of art mapping through the lens of the audience who is not involved in the creative part, and how does the audience identify the city through whatever art is existing outside there in the public. So for example, Arzan's sculptures, they create an identity for the place, like the Dolphin Island or the Rhino Island. So these become markers for the city people who like commute daily. So how do you see mapping through the lens of the audience that is traveling?
Yes, there are multiple questions in the question, but yes, I'm going to try to answer all of them. I would say that I would have two ways to map art in public space. There is the permanent art in public space, and there is the ephemeral one. So the work you presented is indeed creating a landmark, an identity to the city. There used to be impressive sculpture in front of the NGMA, sculpture by senior artists that were removed. So there is a history of work that were also supposed to be permanent, have disappeared, but they were part of the culture of the city. The kind of phenomenon that I feel start to happen is also this increasing number of festivals, and that was a point I wanted to bring back regarding the previous conversation. I think those public art festivals are an amazing way to reach new audience. When we're thinking of is the north of the city not receptive to art or something like that? When you see the success that the event Thane Art Festival had 2 years ago, they didn't have enough ticket after the first day to sell because it was so successful. So there is the audience, no doubt about this. But it's also true that when you look at the experience of events such as Art Oxygen, I discussed with them, doing a mapping of where your art event happened for the past years. At the beginning, you were having event in Thane, in Ghatkopar, Bandra, Juhu, okay. But I said now it turned to go again back to Bandra, Juhu, and not anymore to those places. They said, yes, but the reception was not there, and it was a little more difficult, so we went to places where there were the reception. So let's see how we really need to think of that, how to go in those spaces and bring also an in situ art that is also really in dialogue with the space, with the inhabitants, which is integrating also maybe more the audience as part of the making process of the artwork. I also remember the initiative of the BMW Bhauda Gilad Museum that was also trying to explore those new eras. So many initiatives are on the way. Let's be hopeful that we're progressively getting this new audience, not necessarily through museum or structures that already exist. If the people don't come to the museum, let's try to go with other means to this potential audience.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, my name is...
questions, but make them really brief if you don't mind.
Just a small question. My name is Abel Barreto. Okay, I just have a small question. Does the changing skyline of Mumbai be considered as modern art? Because see, maybe what we are considering here is, since Kala Ghoda is organizing everything, so this is the center and the periphery as such. But imagine, let's understand that 50 years ago something else was there. 50 years in the future something else will be there. As long as we are not moving out from this place and setting a space somewhere else, we will be stuck at this place only. So my question to you is the changing skyline of Mumbai can be considered as modern arts?
Okay, one more question. We'll club them together, please.
I'm Priyal, and this is not a question, it's more of a meditation on what Arzan has just put up as a question about different galleries in different locations getting different kinds of audiences. I would like to say that you were talking about the experiment of circular space in a rectangular space, Arzan. So I think the same thing is happening with the city. The kind of space that we have around the galleries, if someone is coming for an event to Kala Ghoda or to say Kitab Khana, they're crossing Flora Fountain, and their behavior, their mental space is very different than someone who's visiting, say, Prithvi for an event and crossing Juhu Beach. So I feel the answer is there. So it's not really a question, just a response. Thank you.
Any responses? Quick responses or
to him? I think it all depends on the individual. I mean, if you're living on a Juhu seafront and you have a building coming up in front of you, you're not going to think it's modern art, you know? So all depends. If you're far away living in Bandra and then you see some beautiful nightscape coming up in terms of this thing, you might consider as modern art, you know? So.
Absolutely. Yes.
You have, we still have developed certain things as an art. So my ideology, it was just an ideology, so that was a positive.
No, fair enough. But that was my individual thing, and even if I answer you, I mean, I'm a very small bit. I'm not changing your thinking or my thinking. That's gonna exist.
Right.
We are not gonna change that bit.
I think. Christian, would you like to? All right. I think we have to wrap up, ma'am. So if you don't mind. Thank you very much for being such a wonderful, responsive audience. And thanks, Sunil, thanks, Arzan, and thanks, Christian, for being such a wonderful panel. We hope all of you make it to the next session of the art maps, charting Kala Ghoda. Thank you very much.